Hi, this is Chapter 7 of the Essentials of Human Behavior with Hutchinson. And in this chapter, we focus on family. We focus the family as determined by biology, legal norms, and socially. And it's important to understand that there are lots of different ways to be a family and to experience family, and that some of us have ideas of what family should be about and what family should mean to each other. And then there's the experience that each person actually has. So as a social worker, it's really important that you allow the person to define what family is to them, who their family is, and what they get or don't get from their family. So the last two slides of this whole presentation actually, I think, give you the best so what, because they talk about the implications for social workers. And basically, it's allowing the person to define family and to realize that it's a social construct that is influenced by a lot of social factors, and that it historically and culturally have had different meanings. So there's a lot of different writers about families, determining what it is and how you define it, and over time and throughout cultures it has been defined differently. Again, the biggest so what I think of this chapter is to help you loosen whatever preconceived ideas you had about what family is, so that you can embrace the experience of the person or people that you're working with. When we as social workers work with families, we often work from different perspectives. It could be the psychodynamic perspective, family systems, feminist perspective, family stress and coping perspective, and family resilience perspective. And this chapter goes through those different perspectives. Bowen is one of the ones that is often talked about when talking about families, and he really developed theories about the impact the family has on the individual, especially in early childhood. And that there's a differentiation between the self and the other members of the family, and that things like triangulation can be strong factors within it. So as social workers, if you're psychodynamic, you're thinking more of family of origin issues, how those impact that person's family today, some of the roles and sense of self that concepts would be the ones that you'd be looking at for the family members. Family systems steps back a little bit and looks at more the family's boundaries, their relationship with each other, communication, their involvement with members outside of their family. Feminist perspective looks a lot at intersectionality, really. So it looks at the role of disability, culture, uh, gender issues, oppression, power, all of those when looking at the functions of the family and whether the family is creating well-being or hurting. And family stress and coping perspective, and then you'll see in a bit, resilience are very closely tied. Really, they're talking about how do families function when there's a crisis? Where do they find their strengths? What methods and coping skills do they use? And within that family, what are some stress areas for them? And what ways have they handled the stressors that might be less effective? And what ways can they do it that's more effective? And that there are different things that they can use when dealing with crisis. Their belief systems, how the family itself is organized, the ways of processing. In its simplest, when you're thinking about resilience, you're thinking about a person's ability to access and use the resources around them. And so how well is a family able to do that? So this slide on diversity in family life, again, it's really just to get you to step out of whatever predefined idea you have about what family is, and to really be expansive with that. The fact that in 2012, so this is 5 years ago as of this, or 6 years ago as of this taping, 20% of households in the United States were married couples with children, and that's what we consider the nuclear family. And historically, limitedly historically, like say in this century, we're in a different century. So since, say, 1900s up, we've been really looking at the nuclear family as if that's a norm in the United States, and it isn't the norm. That much more what we see is extended families, and you're going to see the extended families with multi-generational members, but also with people who may not be physically related to us, but are emotionally related to us. And that families isn't about whether or not there are children there. It's not about whether or not there's two parents. That families really are defined as a collection of people who, on some level, have shared experiences and perhaps commitments to each other. Our society creates certain benefits for concepts that we promote, and those concepts that we promote might be because at one period of time it really helped us to survive as a people. It could be that some moral or value-laden concept pushed those in power to develop policies that favored certain values. But you would see a lot of politics revolving around the concept of family values without really fully incorporating how expansive family is. And so certain laws have been created, especially in our society, that benefit those who mirror more of a nuclear family, especially like tax laws. And yet very few of us are actually in those families. And it then becomes this exclusive right, this privilege, if you get to be in that inner circle of legitimacy. And so when gay marriage passed in 2015, it was that expanding of legitimacy for an entire group of people. When you're thinking about life stressors, whether it's poverty, whether it's mobility, whether it's migration, or whether it's families within the military, you're looking at very specific external stressors that are in addition to the normal life course development of a family. And the number of slides here is talking about what do you do with military families? What do you need to be thinking about? And for the children within military families, a lot of what you're talking about is consistency and that nurturing and connection if parents are being sent abroad or other places. There are family economic stress models. Economic hardship leads to economic pressure, which leads to parental distress, which leads to disrupted family relationships, which lead to child and adolescent adjustment problems. So the question is, geez, there's so many people whose kids are part of DCF, Department of Children and Family Services. Is that because there's something about being poor that makes you a crappy parent? Well, the truth is there's something about being stressed and economically scared that makes it hard to have much resources to give out to others. And I'm not talking about financial resources, although that's true. I'm talking about emotional. When you're worrying every single day, it's hard to be present and as nurturing as you'd want to be to those around you. And so you break with the stress. Does that mean that people with money are better parents? No, no. Bad parenting goes all across the system, but so people, not everyone is a good parent. It's probably a minority that are really good parents. So if you have a minority that are really good parents, child focused, and then you have everybody else, well, then everybody else is struggling the best they can to be a good parent. And if they have added stressors like poverty, they're struggling even more. And also, not only are you struggling more if you're poor and you're a parent, but you also can't hide it as well. So if I'm wealthy and I'm struggling as a parent, I can hide it. I can make sure that nobody notices what a crappy parent I am. I'm not saying, it's an example. I'm not saying that people are crappy parents, or that they purposely try to deceive people. But when you have resources, you don't get caught into the system as much. And when you don't get caught into the system, you still maintain a certain amount of control over what you do within your group, your family. So in chapter 6, we talked about culture. And so culture is just as important within the family structure as it is with communities. And so there are many cultural issues that come up, especially when you live in an environment where there are a high rate of migration, people moving away, people moving in from other countries, people moving out to other countries, generations that have lived among a number of countries. All of that becomes part of family culture. All right, family violence. So these are some of the challenges continued. So economic challenges are definitely there. Family violence, one of the things that's difficult about that is that it can also often go unnoticed, because if you look at families from a family systems perspective, some families can stay as a closed system, which means that they don't let new information in, and they carry a lot of secrets, and usually with those secrets is a lot of shame, and so they're able to keep a lot of the violence a secret from others. And again, this goes with resources, right? So the more resources you have, the better it is to be able to contain those secrets. So if I live in a nice little mansion on this nice little tree-lined street, and I'm yelling at my spouse, I'm probably less heard than if I'm in a small apartment building. And so I will get people who are intervening more if I don't have the resources around me to protect myself. The lifetime probability of divorce in the United States still stays at about 50%. It's been 50% for a while. And so you're just as likely to stay married as you are to divorce. That marriage was originally an economic and religious ceremony that wasn't as attached to personal and emotional fulfillment as it is today, and isn't as much of a needed economic force as it is today. And so that creates more choices for people. It creates a different standard of what a marriage should be about. All right, substance abuse, how you see that within families is a number of ways. One, you might see it in the children, and the children might be brought to you because the parents are concerned. It could be within the parents, and in that situation, often agencies are brought in because the family's not functioning well because of one of the parents' substance use. Many people would say that in order to really help the family, you've got to address the substance abuse first, which means really working with the addict. Other people will say, no, 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 you can provide a lot of resources and really help the family grow and enhance themselves even if the substance use continues. All right, these I think are the most important two slides, the implications for social work practice. And basically, they're telling you be very open about what definition of family is. Be aware that we are influenced by culture, our economics, our social status, legal rights, and legal denials. That what happens to the individual impacts the family and vice versa. And that you really, in order to be helpful, it's going to be most helpful to learn what the client feels their family is. So when you're interviewing someone, you know who all is in your household. You're going to want to use open terms like that, so you're not assuming that they're married. So what does your husband do? You wouldn't say that. You would say, you know, who's in your household, and that kind of gives you a sense of who lives in the house. And then you might say, are you in a relationship? Again, you're not making an assumption of gender or whether it's married. And then you just can ask more involved questions as you need to. And again, not out of curiosity, but in order to help flesh out what are the strengths and challenges of this person, and how can these people who are part of that person's emotional and social life help them. Whether it's religious, cultural, economic, you're going to find practices vary within families, and you're going to have to figure out how to work with families. Let's suppose a family uses physical discipline, and you feel like that's not okay. You're going to have to figure out ways of helping the family while those differences exist.